Hi everyone, my name is Yelena, and today we're going to be talking about the evolution of the human diet. I hope you're all going to enjoy in my presentation because it is a very interesting subject and it is about food, right? So first we're going to be talking about the prehistorical times. Then about the beginning of the agriculture, ancient Romans, Greeks, and the Vikings, medieval times, then the Great Discovery, early modern cuisine, present, and the future. So let's get started. In the prehistorical times, humans got their food by hunting, fishing, and gathering, and meat had played the has played the main role because eating meat had been thought to be vital to the evolution of our ancestors' larger brains. But the Paleolithic diet wasn't all meat. Since the hunters usually failed to get meat more than half the times when they went hunting, they were depending on women, the foragers, who collected wild berries, plants, and nuts. So people back then usually ate again when they caught something else or collected something and didn't eat again. So feasting and fasting were completely normal events in the rhythm of life. Then, as farming emerged, those nomadic hunter gatherers were gradually pushed off prime farmland, and that marks the beginning of the Neolithic period. When people domesticated plants and animals and moved to permanent houses. The domestication of cereals such as wheat, barley, and rye created a plentiful food supply, but the diet became far less diverse, which gave the earliest farmers cavities and many new diseases because those cattle, sheep, and goats became the sources of those new diseases. So it was a big problem. Then, as I mentioned, talking about the ancient Rome, Romans ate food that they could grow, such as olives, beans, and many salads. They also used wheat to make bread, and they ate many kinds of meat. As the empire expanded, a lot of new food was added to the menu. That would include carrots, cucumbers, and cabbage, so mostly vegetables. But they never had peppers or tomatoes. Weird. Um, they typically ate 3 meals. For breakfast, they ate a bread or wheat pancake with figs and olives, and also drizzled with honey. Um, then for lunch, a light meal was served, consisting of fish, cold meat, bread, and vegetables. Dinner was the main and the biggest meal, but what was eaten varied among classes. The poor would usually eat with porridge with vegetables, whereas the wealthier people would held elaborate dinner parties that would last up to 8 hours. And on in these dinner parties, they would have many course meals with many kinds of meat like boar, which is wild pig, lamb, deer, and many kinds of bird meat like peacocks, geese, pigeons, and many more. For desserts, since raw sugar was unknown, they would eat many kinds of fruits with honey usually or without even. And since there was a lack of sweetener, the desire to have the most sweet fruit was very big. And also the most wealthiest people would import the very exotic kinds of fruits that were not originally in Rome. Then going to their neighbors, Greeks, ancient Greece. Their diet is fairly similar to the Roman diet. They would have the same thing for breakfast, which would be barley bread dipped in wine. They would also eat taganites, which is a pancake made of flour, olive oil, milk, and honey. Lunch was again considered a midday snack, so it was common to dine on light food like figs, cheese, fish, and olives, and more bread. Dinner, again, the most important and the biggest meal when friends would gather, not family, just friends, and talk about daily events or philosophy. The dinner would consist of egg, fish, olives, cheese, bread, and any vegetable they could grow, which might include asparagus, cabbage, carrots, and cucumbers. So, again, no tomatoes or peppers. Meat again was reserved for the wealthy. Water and wine were consumed throughout the whole day, and sometimes they drank goat cheese, and they also loved gyros, which is a type of a sauce made from a fried, salty, fatty fish. And their desserts again were very simple, just cheese or figs drizzled with honey, since again raw sugar was unknown. Um, then going to the north, to the Vikings. They hunted, farmed crops, grew gardens, and raised animals such as cows, horses, sheep, and chickens. Their farms were generally small, but large enough to keep the family well fed in the good years. They would eat typically two meals: dagmal day meal and natmal night meal. For dagmal, the adults would eat leftover stew from the night before with bread and fruit, whereas the children would have porridge and dried fruit, or perhaps buttermilk and bread. The evening meal could be fish or meat, stewed with vegetables. And as for sweet treats, again, it would be fruit, fresh or dried, with cheese or honey, which was again the only known sweetener. Fruits included apples, cherries, and pears. They also drank ale, buttermilk, and mead strong drink made of fermented honey. Their feasts would include the same foods, but just in a greater quantity and variety. Salt and pepper were widely available, while other spices were imported for the wealthier Vikings. Barley, rye, and oats were the grains that were the best for their climate, and from those cereals they made beer, bread, and stews. They also consumed a variety of vegetables, including cabbage, onions, garlic, and beans, and they grew also some herbs such as dill, parsley, and mustard. So going to the Middle Ages. Medieval cuisine can be differentiated by the cereals and the oils that were used, and that geographical variation in eating was the result of differences in climate, of course, and local customs. In the Western and Northern Europe, the climate was too harsh for the cultivation of grapes and olives, unlike in the South. Also, in the South, wine was the common drink for both rich and poor, while that was beer in the north, and wine was an expensive import. Olive oil was a ubiquitous ingredient in Mediterranean cuisine, but remained also an expensive import in the north, whereas oils of walnut and hazel were much more affordable in the north. But almost universal all over Europe was the almond milk, which was used as a substitute for eggs or milk. The important role back then had church, because churches and their calendars had great influence on eating habits. For instance, consumption of meat was forbidden for a full third of the year for Christians, and all animal products except fish were forbidden during fast and Lent, which is a period of 40 days before Easter. And additionally, it was customary to fast prior to taking the Eucharist, and that was intended to invigorate the soul and to remember the Christ sacrifice for all of us. But in general, there were two meals in a day: dinner at midday and a lighter supper in the evening. Smaller daily meals were common, but became a matter of social status, because those who didn't perform manual labor didn't really need it. They could go without them. And the church preached against gluttony and other weaknesses of being human, so people were ashamed of eating breakfast. But for practical reasons, working men, children, women, and the elderly would still eat breakfast, of course. And the snacks were also common, again disliked by the church but common. And working men received an allowance from their employers to buy something during their breaks. Then going to the 15th century and the Columbus big discovery of Americas in 1492, which made a big impact on European cuisine. Because many staples of today's diet were brought to the old world. Most important would be potato, corn, maize, tomato, bell pepper, and pumpkin. The biggest game changer is definitely potato. Its cultivation, although took several decades to spread throughout the Europe because many thought it was poisonous. But it became a staple and it fueled the rise of the West. And though the potato ended famine in parts of Europe, a major potato blight in the 19th century caused many, many problems, especially in Ireland. Um, Also, tomatoes were not a favorite from the start either. Many thought they were poisonous and they confused it with the poisonous nightshade plant, and it became popular only when tomato soup was made. Also, corn is very important because of its versatile use today. Then going to the period between 17th and 19th century, which is called early modern European cuisine. It was a period full of dishes inherited from the medieval times, combined with the innovations of the New World. Also important is the establishment of new trade routes with Asia and influences from sub-Saharan and middle sub-Saharan Africa and Middle East. And also Europeans got to know many, many new food and spices that were no more a luxury. In general, there was a very great increase in prosperity in Europe back then, which considerably changed the patterns of eating. In most parts of Europe, 2 meals per day were eaten, one in the early morning to noon and one in the late afternoon or later at night. And later, there was a gradual shift of meal times. The first meal, then called dinner in English, moved from before noon to around 2 to 3 p.m. And this created a meal called luncheon, later shortened to lunch. Breakfast does not receive much attention, and even when it became kinda popular, it was still mostly just coffee, tea, or chocolate, and it did not become a staple till the 19th century. When talking about the present, we still eat mainly meat and dairy. However, there is much more processed meat, prepackaged foods, butter, candy, fried foods, and many more that are very problematic. And also, an important factor is globalization. Since we have everything available everywhere and anywhere, it is not a rare sight to have Chinese, Italian, and Mexican food just in one street or one block. But on the other hand, there are more and more people turning to veganism or plant-based diets for both health and environmental reasons. And a very common side is organic food or so-called superfood, which is mostly plant-based, but also some fish and dairy food that is thought to be very nutritionally rich and thus very good for one's health. For example, salmon, eggs, nuts, and even chocolate, but I think it's only dark chocolate. There are many diet trends also, like intermittent fasting, gluten-free diet, or keto or paleo diet. For example, the popularity of paleo or Stone Age diet is based on the idea that modern humans evolved to eat the way hunter-gatherers did, and that our genes haven't had enough time to adapt to farmed foods. So according to the diet, we need plenty of lean meat and fish, but no dairy products, beans, or grains. So the paleo diet suggests that if we eat like this, we can avoid diseases as heart disease or diabetes. And when talking about the future, if we, for example, look at 2050, when we'll need to feed 2 billion more people, the question of which diet is best is often being asked, because the food that we choose to eat today and in the coming decades will have a deciding role for the planet. And to simply put it, a diet that revolves around meat and dairy will not do at all. So there are many noteworthy food innovations, such as meatless meat. For example, in Silicon Valley, a startup called Impossible Foods has created a meat-free burger that tastes like meat and bleeds like meat. It is designed to be sustainable and environmentally friendly, and the burgers are made with wheat protein, coconut oil, and potato protein. But the secret ingredient is heme, which is a oxygen carrying molecule that makes both meat and blood red and gives the meat Matsevich flavor. There are many more startups that are developing animal-free milk and egg whites, but there are also many existing foods that are believed to be food of the future, as algae, seaweed, insects, and are just like some of them. Also, a lot of Asian cuisine, as Korean food and Thai food, are getting more popular. But the quirkiest one has to be an edible water bubble, which is a solution for a plastic water bottle. And also, there is an emerging field of personalized nutrition that will offer healthy eating guidance tailored to an individual by using genetic tests. It will enable us with the knowledge of what kinds of fruits and vegetables or whole grains we should be choosing, or exactly how often. So yeah, that was all. I hope you enjoyed my presentation. Thank you for your attention and have a good day. Bye.